never discovering their authentic selves. Over a century ago, Nietzsche recognized this profound human tragedy unfolding. Have you ever felt that persistent discomfort, that something fundamental about your life doesn't align with who you really are? That unsettling feeling isn't failure. It's actually the first whisper of your authentic self trying to emerge. Ever wondered why certain paths feel wrong despite external validation? Through Nietzsche's revolutionary philosophy, I'll guide you to transform that existential anxiety into a powerful catalyst for self-discovery and authentic living. If you're ready to explore that journey, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more. What if the opinions you hold most dear aren't actually yours? The uncomfortable truth is that most of our beliefs are inherited rather than chosen. We move through life defending ideas, upholding values, and making decisions based on a framework that was largely constructed for us, not by us. This is the essence of what Nietzsche identified as the herd mentality, a profound tendency toward conformity where individuals adopt the prevailing values and beliefs of their community without subjecting them to critical examination. This collective conformity creates an existential crisis. Many people sense something is missing in their lives, a vague disconnection they can't quite name. They follow prescribed paths, education, career, relationships, retirement, yet feel an underlying emptiness. This disconnection, through Nietzsche's lens, stems from a fundamental separation from one's authentic self when living primarily through borrowed values. The herd mentality has evolved into sophisticated forms in modern society. Social media platforms serve as powerful amplifiers of this tendency, creating validation systems that pressure users toward conformity. The pursuit of likes and follows establishes a reward mechanism for adopting popular opinions rather than developing original perspectives. Users present curated versions of themselves, suppressing individuality while simultaneously feeling inadequate as they compare themselves to idealized representations of others. In our daily lives, the herd mentality appears in career paths chosen to please others rather than fulfill personal callings, and in relationships maintained from obligation instead of genuine connection. External expectations substitute for internal direction, creating lives built around pleasing others rather than expressing authenticity. Nietzsche's concept of conventional morality provides insight into how this conformity functions. This system often prioritizes traits like humility and conformity, qualities that, while seemingly virtuous, can stigmatize those who deviate from established norms, creating guilt in individuals who attempt to break free. But how do we break these invisible chains? The first step toward liberation requires recognizing these external influences that have shaped your identity. One practical technique involves the voice exercise, identifying exactly whose voice you hear when you criticize yourself. When that internal critic speaks, whose tone and language does it use? A parent's disapproval? A teacher's correction? By recognizing these internalized voices, you begin to separate your authentic self from external conditioning. This concept aligns with psychological research on conformity. Studies by Solomon Asch and Stanley Milgram demonstrated how individuals conform to group judgments, even when those judgments contradict their own observations, explaining why we might follow career paths others approve of despite our instincts, or remain silent when our values are challenged in social settings. More recent research connects authentic living with psychological well-being, showing that alignment between actions and personal values contributes significantly to life satisfaction. Challenging internalized beliefs requires self-reflection through practices like journaling to identify the origins of limiting beliefs, mindfulness to become aware of automatic thoughts, or cognitive restructuring to reframe negative self-talk. Additional approaches include identifying core values, independent of social expectations, establishing boundaries, and finding communities that encourage individuality. Recognizing external influences represents the essential first step toward reclaiming autonomy. The herd mentality functions most effectively when invisible, when we mistake borrowed values for personal choices. By bringing these influences into conscious awareness, you create the possibility of examining them critically. The herd mentality ultimately prevents authentic self-discovery by offering pre-packaged values that substitute for personal meaning. These perspectives provide the comfort of belonging, but they extract a tremendous cost: the sacrifice of individual potential. Recognition of these influences creates the necessary conditions for beginning the journey toward authenticity. Once we recognize the invisible chains of societal conditioning, we encounter the true gateway to self-discovery: our resistance to discomfort. While the herd mentality offers security through prepackaged meaning, Nietzsche proposes a counterintuitive alternative. Our deepest fulfillment emerges from embracing pain as the essential catalyst for transformation. The path beyond conformity leads through necessary suffering, a concept Nietzsche insisted was the only viable path to authentic self-discovery. No price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. This profound statement captures the essence of what lies ahead on the journey to authenticity. It suggests that genuine self-ownership requires a willingness to face difficult truths about our existence, truths that most people actively avoid confronting throughout their lives. The discomfort we feel when examining our choices, relationships, and compromises constitutes the very substance of self-discovery. This reluctance to face uncomfortable realities is deeply embedded in our psychological makeup. We construct elaborate systems of self-deception because honest self-examination requires confronting painful truths. That some cherished relationships may be based on mutual inauthenticity, that career choices might reflect others' expectations rather than genuine desires, or that moral positions might be adopted without personal conviction. These realizations create cognitive dissonance, threatening the coherent narrative we've constructed about ourselves. Nietzsche reframes suffering as an essential component of growth and self-realization. In this framework, discomfort becomes prerequisite, the necessary condition for reaching greater heights of self-awareness. Like a weightlifter who deliberately tears muscle fibers to stimulate growth, we must intentionally stress our psychological comfort zones to develop authentic selfhood. Consider the story of a successful executive who, despite external achievements, felt a persistent emptiness. Only after deliberately stepping away from social validation and confronting his fear of disapproval did he discover his authentic voice. The pain of recognizing wasted years pursuing others' definitions of success became the doorway to liberation, precisely as Nietzsche predicted. Creating a structured approach to this difficult journey can make the process more manageable. A Nietzschean self-discovery practice includes several key elements. First, scheduled solitude becomes essential. Creating regular periods of isolation from social influence allows your authentic voice to emerge. Second, journaling practices that deliberately challenge assumptions can reveal blind spots in your self-understanding. Third, systematic questioning of long-held beliefs helps identify which values you've consciously chosen versus those you've passively absorbed. Nietzsche characterized this process as a necessary desert period for spiritual growth. This separation isn't about becoming permanently isolated, but about temporarily stepping away from social conditioning to hear your own thoughts clearly. The strategic use of solitude creates space for genuine self-reflection, allowing you to distinguish between socially reinforced thoughts and authentic inclinations. The courage required for this journey shouldn't be underestimated. Designing a path through uncomfortable self-discovery means willingly walking into experiences most people avoid. It means questioning deeply personal attachments, examining whether your relationships, career, lifestyle, and beliefs align with your authentic self, or merely represent comfortable compromises. This courage ultimately leads to unprecedented clarity, the ability to see your life as an expression of conscious choice. What emerges from Nietzsche's perspective is a profound insight. Self-discovery requires embracing discomfort as the necessary price for authenticity. The privilege of truly owning yourself comes with a substantial cost, facing painful truths, questioning comfortable assumptions, and potentially reconfiguring significant aspects of your life. Like a sculptor removing excess material to reveal the form within, the authentic self emerges through the sometimes painful process of removing what doesn't belong. The sculptor has removed the excess stone, but now stands before a truly daunting challenge. Having stripped away what doesn't belong, we confront perhaps the most unnerving question on this journey. What if there is no inherent meaning waiting to be discovered beneath all those layers? What if, instead of being archaeologists uncovering buried purpose, we must become architects, designing meaning from nothing but our own will? This question strikes at the heart of Nietzsche's response to what he saw as the great crisis of modernity. In a world where traditional sources of meaning, primarily religion, had been undermined by scientific progress and rational inquiry, individuals were left in an existential vacuum. This vacuum creates a particularly modern form of suffering, not knowing what matters or why we should continue to exist at all. Many people feel adrift without external guidance, desperately seeking answers about which experiences truly matter. After confronting this discomfort of meaninglessness, we can move toward active meaning creation. Nietzsche proposed 3 distinct pathways through which individuals might cultivate meaning in their lives. The first involves engaging with the humanities. Philosophy, art, music, literature, and theater provide many benefits traditionally offered by religion. They contextualize suffering and help us understand the human condition. Consider how reading a novel about grief might help someone process their own loss, or how a philosophical text might frame a personal ethical dilemma in a broader context. The second pathway involves the concept of the Übermensch, an individual who creates their own values independent of external authorities. This isn't about dominating others but achieving self-mastery. This might manifest as someone rejecting conventional career success to pursue creative work they deeply value, or establishing personal ethical principles that differ from their cultural inheritance. The third pathway is amor fati, the love of fate. This concept encourages us to accept every aspect of our lives, including suffering. Rather than merely tolerating what happens to us, we affirm it as integral to our journey. Someone practicing amor fati might transform a health setback into an opportunity for greater self-awareness, or embrace a professional failure as a necessary step toward growth. What unites these approaches is their emphasis on active creation rather than passive discovery. Meaning isn't something waiting to be found. It's something we construct through our choices and commitments. This perspective transforms what might be a depressing conclusion, that life has no inherent purpose, into something potentially liberating. But how do we translate these philosophical concepts into practical action? Several frameworks can guide this process of meaning-making. The first is an energy audit. Pay attention to which activities give you energy versus those that drain you. For example, you might notice that despite physical tiredness, teaching others leaves you mentally energized, while scrolling social media, though seemingly restful, leaves you depleted. Second is the deathbed perspective. Imagine yourself at life's end, reflecting on how you've spent your time. Would you regret not spending more time with family? Or perhaps not pursuing that creative passion? A person might realize that working excessive overtime will seem meaningless compared to relationships they neglected. Third is the curiosity compass. What naturally draws your interest, even without external reward? Someone might notice they consistently read about architecture, suggesting a meaningful direction worth exploring further. These frameworks help us identify where our authentic interests lie and distinguish between genuine calling and social conditioning. This active approach transforms passive nihilism, the depressive conclusion that nothing matters, into active nihilism, where the absence of inherent meaning becomes the very condition for our freedom to create purpose. The void that initially appears terrifying becomes the blank canvas on which we can paint our own masterpiece. The blank canvas awaits your authentic creation, but consider a disturbing possibility. What if the very brushes you're using were designed by others to paint their vision? not yours. Behind the masterpiece, you've been crafting lies a more challenging task, determining which elements truly express your authentic self and which are merely echoes of external voices. Nietzsche's thought experiment of the greatest weight confronts us with this unsettling reality. Imagine a demon whispering that you must relive your life exactly as it is, infinitely, for eternity, every choice, every victory, every mistake replayed without alteration. Would this news crush you with despair, or would you recognize it as the ultimate validation of a life authentically lived? This prospect becomes unbearable when we recognize the mismatch between our authentic desires and the life we've constructed from inherited values, like wearing ill-fitting clothes passed down through generations, constantly adjusting and uncomfortable, never truly at ease. When we operate from values we've unconsciously absorbed rather than consciously chosen, we find ourselves repeating patterns that never satisfy, making decisions that feel hollow, and living a life that leaves us with a persistent feeling of inauthenticity. This weight grows heavier with time as the gap between who we are and who we pretend to be widens. To apply Nietzsche's thought experiment practically, ask yourself, if forced to live my exact same life repeatedly for eternity, which aspects would fill me with dread? Which relationships would become unbearable? Which daily activities would transform from inconveniences into eternal tortures? Your answers reveal misalignments between your actions and authentic values, highlighting precisely what needs transformation. The elements that bring joy rather than dread point toward your authentic path. Implementing authentic values requires more than intellectual recognition. It demands practical transformation through action. Begin with a structured value audit. Create a comprehensive inventory of your current values in relationships, work, morality, and success. For each value, identify its source. Did it come from your parents? Religious upbringing? Cultural influences? Educational institutions? This origin tracing often reveals surprising patterns.